We're gonna fast forward a little bit today. Things that are making me think today, and I do think that there's been kind of a gap of there was a time where there was a lull in content, or there's always obviously interesting conversations happening, but it seems like there are moments where new things happen and new things make you think, and they readjust your categories, and they deepen meaning. So a couple of those things recently have been Redeemed Zoomer, Passion 2024, and the ARC Conference. And I'll add the Asbury College Revival onto there. These things are old stories, new stories, and better stories. It's unlikely that if you're in this little corner of the internet that you haven't bumped into the massive wave that has been Redeemed Zoomer over the last year or so on YouTube. It's a channel that is ran by a young man who is in the, the kind of campy, on fire, on a mission. I think you could kind of wrap it up in wanting to recapture leftist Protestant Christianity, historical Protestant Christianity, and recover it to a historical tradition or traditional orthodoxy. He's very much a young Martin Luther, it seems. I was immediately sucked into his 10-minute Windows 95, Microsoft Word, PowerPoints on YouTube, dissecting church history, denominations, and theology. All those things, all those meaning things, all those philosophy things, all those interesting things. I was so drawn in that I actually DM'd him on Instagram to see if he'd be willing to have a conversation, and he graciously agreed to. And at that time, he was like pushing 200 subs on YouTube, so I was really shocked. And I think that, again, that just kind of speaks to what's happening, why I'm making videos, why I'm trying to connect with you is because we can, and maybe we even should. So we had a really cool conversation, about 30 minutes, and I was just tossing out some, I guess, ideas or thoughts I had from my perspective, and my perspective comes now from a middle-aged man to this young man. And he was probably actually building cathedrals on Minecraft while we were talking. I probably bored him, but nonetheless, he's definitely a product of the trad rejection of the meta-modern church. Think concert and TED Talk Christianity. And he's kind of like Bitcoin networking his way to usurp this leftist power over historical Christian church institutions. And he wants to reclaim them for historical orthodoxy and Christian teaching. And it honestly fascinates me. It inspires me, encourages me, interests me. So that happened this last year. And then I was on Facebook, and I kind of had this urge to kind of reconnect with some people in ministry or kind of creative spaces that I've known in years past, but I wasn't connected to on social media. And one of those guys he's at a part of a network of large churches in Little Rock, and I saw him posting things like Augustinian prayers, and I was like, this is coming from a church that's been in the last 20 years, not known for looking back, but more like looking forward. And I reached out to him and I talked to him, caught up with him, like where's that coming from? And was, encouraged in that, seeing someone connected to that space, kind of meta-modern church that is sensing a need that I've recognized for a while, that this young man, Redeemed Zoomer, is very young, he's early 20s, and like he's already like jumping headlong into this and in it for the long haul. So these trends or these patterns emerging, and and even earlier, I think it was this last year, there was the revival at Asbury College, very stripped down, but still recognizably meta-modern, I would say, evangelical, charismatic. But, it harkens back to the stories you would have heard from, if you've been a modern Baptist evangelical the last 20 years, serious about it 20 years ago, like Matt Redman, writing the song called The Heart of Worship, which was, there's the story and the myth goes that he just, they were doing the full rock band and they felt like it was becoming too idolatrous, and so they stripped away everything and they just had chairs and a guitar, and they said, we're coming back to the heart of worship, it's all about you, Jesus. And you kind of saw that at Asbury, a new wave of that. And then fast forward to Passion 2024, and I'm sure that there's pieces of that are connected to Asbury, and there's 60,000 strong in Mercedes-Benz Auditorium. And it's a very powerful sight to behold. I've seen some of the reels on Instagram, and so you have these worlds in Christendom that don't look anything alike and function very differently and have different values, but I see what Redeemed Zoomer is doing, and I see and I resonate with being 20 years old and encountering and worshiping with thousands and thousands of other people, and encountering God amongst that, in that, through that. And I wonder, how do these two spaces talk to each other? How do these two spaces understand each other? Because I kind of somehow was put in between them in my life. Family, Lutheran, Catholic, very Baptist, charismatic history of my side, and the music, and I'll even make this point, Redeemed Zoomer, they wrote, when he helped organize a 95 thesis on day, and Christianity Today wrote about it. I don't remember if it was Mike Cosper who works there now, but he actually was instrumental in me bridging these worlds about liturgy and framing worship in a different way from the 4 songs in a lecture type situation at church. And so, because I think what happens in 20 years to these young people at Passion at the Passion Conference, what happens in 20 years to the people at Asbury, because I was those people 20 years ago. When life isn't college bliss, isn't full of energy. And to that point, what happens to Redeem Zoomer in 20 years? Because everybody's assumptions will be challenged, and everybody will experience more pain than they thought that they could imagine. And on the other side of those experiences, what's left? And I think that they'll find themselves in a hallway, not in either one of those spaces, possibly. That's not necessarily true, but that's been my story. And it, out of 60,000 people and 200,000 subs on YouTube, that will be other people's story as well. And since these categories are being disrupted, there's opportunity to minister, to care, to walk alongside, to journey with, to help rebuild. So I don't know. I have hope for both kind of the redeemed Zoom, culture, and the young, passionate people's thing. And I mean, I'll give a, Redeemed Zoomer, he is brilliant. There's no question he can read. And he has high levels of comprehension. And he's, having conversations with people 20 years older, 20, 30 years older than him, hanging there about confessional theology and church history. But he's building churches on Minecraft. And on the ground, which I know, from a few other conversations I had with him through messaging, that, he is in serious conversations with people, like leaders in different groups, about hope for these institutions. But that's a big challenge, and the idealism does get grounded away sometimes because of the roadblocks and the struggle that can take place. So it's one thing to build churches on Minecraft and YouTube, as we're finding, quote unquote. But it is another thing to build a church in real life, wherever you're at. And it's a completely another thing to think, what would it look like to infuse life back into these institutions and be a part of bringing the power of these real estate and these physical structures to people's worship and religious practice. So, I'm very interested in that, but and I'm also interested in young creative people and old creative people that are the ones that know how to harness art now. Because that's what harnessing art into a cathedral is, and the most talented people in those spaces are, I know them. Like from where I'm from, I know some of the most talented people when it comes to creativity and the worlds that they're in. And they're, and I think how different it was 100 years ago, even in the small town that I'm from, when everybody in church, everybody on Sunday went to basically 4 different churches. And I think that vision for me is also a part of like not wanting to just keep fragmenting, which I think is part of the Redeem Zoomer thing. But I don't know how you keep doing that when there's also this impulse from other areas to plant. So, questions. And I'm biased when it comes to Redeem Zoomer because I still like rock music, and he poos on Hillsong and the like. And I think I understand why there's a lot of people unhappy with that stuff in ways. But if you watch my little tour, I'm a middle-aged rock and roll guy now. So, so how do these things intersect with ARC, the recent ARC conference? Oh man. So you have, mass evangel, big evang 2024 passion. You have Redeem Zoomer and a new Protestant Reformation. And then you have ARC, which is like this third arm of the TL. And it's probably where this little corner is more in that space, in the ARC, so to speak, which ARC conference is the Alliance of Responsible Citizens that Jordan Peterson recently helped hold, and he kind of co-led it. I think it's with the guy who was the Prime Minister out of Australia, and who has had a great podcast. And they met in London and had a large, several thousand people. I know Paul was there, Paul Vanderklay, and many others. Guys like, I think Chris Williamson was there. It's a very broad thing, but it's also this, in my view, it's kind of a part of Christendom. Because it's the people who left the whole project of Christianity that are now trying to find their way back in a way. They use the cut flower analogy. And if you can think like Tom Holland and Anya Hersey Ali, recent converts fighting for Western civilization against other powers that be. And I think these things kind of encapsulate Christendom. And can there be a further, well, think of it as 100 years ago when basically everybody in my town went to 4 different churches. That's a pretty... And can there be an alliance of elves, men, and dwarves once again? And I'll let you all draw all the metaphor out on that one. But I definitely think that YouTube, Dialogos, and places like X are where these conversations keep going further. So yeah, that's my first modern, current take. So if you're interested in those, hit the little face down here to subscribe or watch some of the other videos. All right.